My name is Marilyn Quinlan, and as I said earlier, I'm just very seasoned. I'm not old, I'm just very seasoned because this is my daughter, Emily. Been in the insurance industry since straight out of college. Started as an underwriter, went to an underwriting manager for package, and at that time, the whole package, including the inland marine and the bond and everything else, was about 32 pages long, the policy. So I underwrote all lines of insurance, but I've been a broker now for 25 years and love being on the broker side. And I've worked for, national firms and migrated to Alliant because frankly, I have two other children who are also brokers like me. And within the last 2 years, we all migrated to Alliant, frankly, because it's enterprising, it's innovative, and it's fun. And it's 53% owned by employees. So we feel passionate about what we do. So Emily.
Yeah, so my name is Emily Quinlan. I followed my mom's footsteps and went into the insurance industry. Unlike her, I never went to the company side. I started right on the brokerage side, but I actually started in high school, just doing data entry. It intrigued me enough that I did an internship in college and started my career right out of college. So I've been a broker for just about 15 years. I started on personal lines and then moved into a short stint in claims and went on to commercial shortly after that. The last 12 years, I've been focusing on private equity, kind of dealing with mergers and acquisitions from the due diligence stage through that process, and then the go forward coverage until private equity firm divests their investment. So we're gonna share our screen now and start walking through our presentation. We invite you to raise your hand or interrupt us at any point. We want this to be very interactive, though we did also build a Q&A at the end, should that be more helpful. We're also kind of fighting the sun now, so you might see me adjusting our computer a little bit to fight those sun rays. All right.
This is Chris. I'm just going to tell people that this can be interactive. You can also put things in the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat for if you have questions. But I think this is designed to be interactive as well as having some Q&A at the end. So
that is correct. I'm having sorry about this. The presentation dropped for some reason.
I mean, if you're having problems, if you want to send me the presentation, then I can run it, if that helps.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think we just got it up and going. So let me just go back to here to share our screen. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay.
yes.
Great. So the intent of we're going to shift a little bit this way, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to go over the property and casualty state of the market, but to really understand that, we think it's important to know the difference between a hard market and a soft market, kind of how the reinsurance world plays into the state of the market and how that eventually gets to the end user, and then the potential of the pandemic coverage, because that's kind of top of mind, and that will also play into how catastrophic losses are covered, such as terrorism or pandemic. And then lastly, we'll go into the state of the market, giving a high level overview, and then line by line the coverage of where we see the changes coming on the coverage level, on retentions, and on pricing. We kind of already did this first step. Oh, here's our company. So we are one of the top 10 brokers nationally. We have about 8,700 employees and offices around the country in every state and most heavy populated areas. We are 53% owned by employees, and I think that really drives the culture of Alliant, which is really what drew my brothers, my mom, and I to this firm. As a company, we place over $23 billion in premium. That number probably isn't too important to the end user, but what that means to us is we have a lot of leverage with insurance companies when we're going after coverage or premium or rates with you for your coverage. And it also means that we have access to all insurance companies as they want to do business with us. The company is 62% female. which is something I'm very proud of. But our executive management team is 51%, which is another thing I'm very proud of. We're really diving more into our diversity and inclusion efforts. I actually co-lead our Women at Alliant group, and I'm one of the managers of our Alliant diversity division. And I find it interesting and invigorating that we're really investing in that. I think we're a little late to the game, but better late than never. We already did our bios. This is our contact information, but we'll be sending around our deck along with a more in-depth report after our meeting today. We'll share it with Charlotte where she can share it with everyone. So feel free to contact us at any point. So we'll start with the hard versus soft market. We're currently in a hard market, but we should hopefully be going to a soft market within the next few years, because right now, in a very unusual state of the world, is almost every line of coverage is experiencing hard market. Typically, it's not that case. A soft market means that there's more capacity out there. So you typically get broader coverage, more competitive rates, lower premiums. The underwriting process is a lot easier as underwriters are competing for your business. So they don't want to push you away by asking for a ton of detailed information, and they have more authority on their desk. So it's easier for them to offer terms and compete for your terms without needing to check every box in their underwriting file. A hard market is the complete opposite of that. There's less insurers that are interested in fighting for your business. They kind of take the leverage back into their own hands. And so they do require complete submissions. They require all the applications. They require really to kind of negotiate and earn that coverage. So it's a lot stricter. The capacity that's available is a lot smaller. So they have to be very strategic with which business they go after and what part of the capacity that they're willing to fight for. There's a lot less competition with insurance markets, and therefore it's the end user ends up getting, unfortunately, a less of a program for a higher premium.
True.
How to navigate the hard market. This, I think, is one of the most important things for yourselves, your companies, and your clients that you speak with that are risk managers or negotiating the program. These are our top 4 recommendations for you. Start your process very early. So a standard renewal would be about 90 days out from your renewal date. And that would be when your broker is starting to go out to submission with your completed applications and information and talking to underwriters and starting those conversations to see what they can bring to the table. We recommend bumping that up to about 6 months, having a pre-renewal discussion internally with your broker, talking about what the expectations are, what keeps you up at night. You're going to have to probably give something up, whether it means higher retentions or maybe you're not going for that excess layer. Have an open conversation and dialogue with your broker, and then work with them to get information as quickly as possible, which allows them more time to get out to market and negotiate the best program available for you. We also recommend, often there's a lot of give and take on what our wish list is when we're sending you applications or exposure data and the details that we're asking for us to go out and negotiate on your behalf. We recommend providing as much as you can and not really dragging your feet on that. In a soft market, it's easy for us to say, hey, I need 1 through 5, 5 through 10 would help the case, but we can get coverage without it. In this type of market, we really need 1 through 10 to sometimes even open a door for discussion, let alone get a competitive program. The third one is be prepared to discuss your risk management and loss control practices. And what we mean by that, especially when it comes to cyber, if you're on a coastal property or California wildfire property, the property you really need to pay attention to, and the executive liability, really around the EPL practices, and especially kind of extending off of the Me Too movement still, and now some issues with, the word's escaping me right now.
Can you use other words to describe it?
Oh, we'll get to it later.
Okay.
So be prepared to talk about your risk management and loss control practices. What are you doing to protect your business? What are you doing to mitigate losses? How are you partnering with the insurance company to make sure that you're doing everything possible to mitigate your losses? And last, be open and try to make the time to talk directly with your underwriters. You are going to be the best advocate for your company. So your broker can go out and tell the story and be passionate about it and to say everything that you're doing, but there's no way that we're going to know 100% of what's going on. So when we get those final underwriters to the table, be open to that discussion and advocating for yourself.
Yeah, I have many stories where clients who showed well to underwriters, the underwriters buy into it. They're human.
Yeah.
They buy into it on a personal level, and then they get a much better deal. So I highly encourage that when you get down to the final 2 or 3 players, if you can, in this day and age, it's hard to meet them in person, but virtually, have meetings with them to tell them even more, because you come across as smart people who are managing your risk.
Right. Next, we'll go into a brief introduction of the reinsurance market, and Marilyn will take the floor.
This may be redundant for many of you people, but in some cases, my CFO clients did not fully understand the reinsurance market and how that is really what drives the pricing. The treaties are, primarily treaties are negotiated on January 1st and July 1st. This year, and I've been in the business a long time, it's the very latest that these were finalized. They weren't finalized, many of them, until like November 1st, which is very trying on a Travelers or a Hartford or a Zurich to get out their renewal quotes, not knowing how much they're going to have to spend to offload some of their risk. So the treaty insurance, basically, the reinsurer looks, audits their books and says, hey, I like the way Hartford underwrites, so you know what, we'll take 10% of all your risk across the whole book. Or in some cases, they'll just take cyber risk or whatever the negotiations are. They happened so late because the reinsurance industry, this is their words, because I was at a conference with the CEOs and the underwriters. Their words, they said, we've taken it in the shorts this year on everything, property, on cyber because of ransomware. We've had it. We're going to, shrink coverage. We're going to increase pricing, and we're going to demand higher retentions from you insurance companies. So I don't have to reiterate everything that happened this year. You guys know all the flooding in Europe and the everything that went on, all the catastrophes around the world, whether it's monsoons or typhoons or hurricanes or wildfire in California. They have had it. So that's why the negotiations went on so long. It's done now. And here's a glimpse of the good news, is that the pricing in 2022 will still be going up, but not as much, not as quickly. The rate is slowing down. That's a glimmer of good news. So in summary, losses are high, capacity is shrinking, and some of their capital is collateralized. But for the most part, there's plenty of capacity in the reinsurance market. It's just that none of them are willing to risk a lot of it on any one risk or any one insurance company. And it's the same with the primary insurance companies. They have plenty of capacity, but they're not willing to write high limits. They don't want $5 million umbrellas. They'll come back and say, okay, we'll renew it, but we're going to renew it at $2 million limit. So spreading the risk more. So you'll see in towers of risk, where we're trying to place lots of limits of liability, you'll see more insurance companies on those risks. Okay, is it a possibility? So many of my clients are saying, really, they're so frustrated that there was no coverage for the pandemic, none at all. But if the insurance industry had covered the pandemic, it was literally worldwide. It would have put the industry under. And that's what happened after 9/11. The insurance industry went to the federal government and said, we can't take another loss like that. I mean, it will put the whole industry out of business. So we need some federal government backing. And that's when the Terrorism Reinsurance Act was born. And the insurance industry, actuarially, they can't predict terrorism. But they started collecting a little bit of money from everybody to go into the pot, which, by the way, still hasn't been used. But meanwhile, the same questions are being asked about pandemic coverage. We do need a relief for all these businesses that need business interruption coverage as a result of the next pandemic. So Carolyn Maloney did introduce the PRIA, the Pandemic Risk Insurance Act, wherein the federal government will be the backstop. They will be the reinsurer of pandemic risk. So it's just the beginnings. But I believe personally that this will happen. And I know the people who are, I know the chair of the, personally the chair of the Terrorism Reinsurance Act, And we both believe, this is going to happen, but it'll take a little time, like everything does. You can see that it's endorsed by everybody, right? Everybody who's in business. So there's hope that something is coming.
It's important to note that this wouldn't be, we're going into the 3rd calendar year of this pandemic, 2 full years of it going on, coming up shortly. This would be kind of a temporary fix for just 180 days, and it would be only your fixed cost and to cover payroll for those 180 days. For a situation like we're in now, it would not cover the full 2 years of coverage at this stage.
Right.
So next we'll jump into the state of the market. We'll start with property and go through various lines of coverage. The property continues to be challenged. Speaking back to what my mom said about the various flooding throughout Europe, wildfires along the West Coast in Colorado and Arizona as well, the frequency of hurricanes and tornadoes and the severity that both of those are causing. It's kind of, I mean, we know it's global warming for the most part, and there's no way to really stop that as quickly as we would like it to stop. And with that, the losses are getting more frequent and more severe, and insurance companies, like my mom spoke to, are taking it in the shorts. So our marketing team put a really extensive report together. We're going to share snippets of it right now, but we will share the entire report afterwards. Starting with property, we anticipate the capacity to be fairly similar. Some insurers are getting out of the market, but that is also introducing new insurers to the market. So we anticipate it to be offset by that, but it will still continue to be very competitive, and we do think rates will continue to go up. Coverage is going down. Historically, a lot of the coverages that are on there are a broad all risk form. We do think that will start to be really underwritten on a more strict basis, and any manuscript forms that really personalize the coverage to your exposures, those are going to be more limited on a go-forward basis too.
Can I ask a question? Who are these new insurers that are coming to market?
Oh, I don't think we're prepared to list them, but we can get that for you, Susie.
No, I don't. Sorry, I'm just sort of characteristic of like, are they from other geographies coming in, or are there non-insurance companies that are now getting into insurance?
Really, they're people who have exited their current employment and creative, enterprising people, and have created new insurance companies, pretty much out of Bermuda. New captives, really, that are coming online. The disappointing part is the new entrants. They're not coming in with price reductions. They're coming in because they don't have to pay the tail of losses, and they can come in at high rates. It's a good time to come into the marketplace. But we can get you that information soon.
No. I was just kind of curious, sort of the dynamics of the industry. I didn't want the specific names, but I'm just curious who they were. Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah.
In addition to the enterprising individuals that are starting it up, we're also seeing some companies who have focused on only casualty, and they're expanding now. They're comfortable with that book. They feel like they've kind of started to walk, and now they can run into other lines. They're dipping their toes into the water of property or dipping their toes into cyber. And so it's an established insurance company that is entering a new line of coverage.
Yeah, or the Swiss Re. So one of their reinsurers.
Yeah,
they're backing one of the new startups for cyber.
Right.
That I forget their name, but they are dipping their toes in the water at the primary level. So just kind of interesting that different parts of the industry see the opportunity.
Getting back to the coverage changes, we do think coverage on property will be more restricted. And so it's not that you can't obtain that coverage, you now just have to really justify why that coverage is specifically needed. And instead of it being included in an all-inclusive form, it'll now be charged for those additional manuscript forms. Retentions, we anticipate them to increase. And what we mean by that, especially for the cat coverages, is less that they're going to go from like 100,000 to 250,000. It's more that they'll flip from being a flat deductible into a percentage deductible. And that is most typically 5% of the total loss with a minimum of 50,000 or a minimum of 100,000 versus just a flat $100,000 deductible. And lastly, unfortunately, we do think prices and rates will continue to rise. The 2021 loss activity isn't fully realized. And so as that continues to hit the books and go throughout the calendar year, we do anticipate insurers to take more rate this year.
So the casualty capacity down, especially in the umbrella excess market. As I explained earlier, the capacity is there, but the insurance companies don't want to risk that much money on any one account. Coverage as well. I think all of you are aware that, and we attribute it to social inflation. The jury awards are getting higher and higher and higher. They, the public seems to want payback from corporate America, and it's showing up in the courts. So that's part of the reason why they don't want to take as big a limit on any one risk. So coverage also is going to shrink, especially, well, obvious, and you've probably already seen this, is all the exclusions for COVID-19 or anything like COVID-19, as well as for chemicals, energy, and then the abuse, molestation, and wildfires. Some of the Lloyd's of London, they now define wildfire. So they'll cover you for fire, but they're going to exclude wildfire. It's nuts. Doesn't make any sense to us. And actually, both of us right now are working on some wildfire risk in California. One's a winery, and one for me is a bunch of schools. And we're challenged at finding some of the locations for fire coverage, but we're working on it. Retentions, we think in the casualty arena will stay about the same. And pricing is competitive, so we see it maybe going down a little bit. We'll see. It depends on your particular risk. You can see the low end and the high end of what we're anticipating based on your claims history and based on your exposures to risk.
And your proactiveness into the risk management and loss controls. The more proactive steps you're taking to protect your company, the more insurance companies we anticipate will reward those.
Right.
Right.
It's interesting to me. It kind of sounds like maybe there's just sort of a strategic effort to limit exposure to climate change because of wildfire or the example I saw actually when we tried to get hurricane insurance in Bahamas is we could get insurance for small hurricanes, but if it's a named hurricane,
Right.
We couldn't get insurance. So am I reading too much into that? But that sounds like that's what the insurance industry is saying. Small events that used to happen will protect against, but things that are being triggered by climate change, that risk is too big and we're not going to insure that. Is that?
You're right on, Susie.
Exactly.
I mean, the believers in climate change, the first believers, I think, are the reinsurers. They've known that for many years. They keep lots of data and analytics and do lots of research with universities throughout the world. And so they've known that this was coming and they know it's not being prevented in any way. So yeah, they are definitely trying to limit their risk. Yeah, you're spot on.
Thank you. Fascinating.
Next, we'll go over the management and professional liability lines. Overall, we continue to see these going up, probably with cyber and EPL being kind of the more severe ones. And depending on your exposures on the D&O side, especially companies going through IPOs, SPACs, going public in any form, we're seeing large increases there. Starting with cyber, this is really driven by the claims activity. They're becoming more frequent, more severe. Hackers are getting extremely sophisticated. Social engineering, which is more of a crime, but kind of covers into cyber as well. I believe the most recent FBI stat is that there's a social engineering loss every 1.7 seconds in the United States. And that's a form of a financial loss where someone is impersonating someone via email or online and trying to get their company to pay a bill or pay an invoice. So due to this and due to the frequency of these losses and the frequency of hacking events and ransomware events, we anticipate, or we are experiencing for the third year in a row, capacity to be sharply decreased, coverage to be sharply decreased and continue to be cut, and retentions and pricing to continue to go up. This market, I would say, is probably the most strained in the industry right now.
Oh yeah.
And changes honestly on a daily basis. We are working on, one of my clients is a larger global operation that operates in 53 countries. We naturally we're pretty much working that account year round. We're working on a renewal for them, and their cyber underwriter will not even talk to us until we're 30 days within the renewal, because he said so much will change between now and that renewal date. he can't even give us an idea of where they'll come in. It's just such a dynamic market right now.
Yeah, I want to offer this to you guys. We have a great checklist of how to prepare for your renewal for cyber liability. And my clients that started 6 months ago, stuff like instituting multi-factor authentication, that kind of stuff. They're faring much better because of their proactiveness in employing some of those. So happy to share that with you guys. Okay, directors and officers. Whew. This is another area that is experiencing increase in pricing. But as you can see, we're predicting the capacity will remain the same, coverage essentially the same, and retention's essentially the same. It's all about just pricing, and it's all about your particular risk profile. That's going to be the thing that dictates the pricing. Financial health will definitely be important. Location, I mean, if you're in California, that's a tougher way to go. But in short, that's what it is. All right, and employment practices. Yeah.
This is also being hit hard. This has been hit hard for many years. And we anticipate the capacity to go down, the retentions and pricing to go back up. This is really driven by continuous claims starting really upticking with the Me Too movement. And then through COVID, there's been a lot of discrimination claims. That was the word I couldn't think of earlier. And that they're coming from a wide variety of ways. The initial wave of discrimination claims that we saw come through that were related to COVID were which employees were laid off first versus not laid off when they were starting to slow down operations. Now we're seeing a secondary wave of discrimination claims come through, and those are related to which employees are rehired or getting better hours or more frequent hours versus employees that are not. This is really coming strongly in the hospitality and retail space, but we are seeing it across all industries. And also speaking to settlements are leaning back onto the casualty notes that you shared. Settlements are getting a lot larger, and what used to be a settlement to take care of the situation at that moment in that time, it's now claims or maybe actual results of lifelong changes in someone's life where they say they can no longer ever work in an office building because of the discrimination that took place. It's a trauma that just reoccurs for them. So the settlements are getting significantly larger and are no longer in the 6-7 digit range and are eking towards the high 8-9 digit range.
Right.
Especially depending if it's a repeat offender that has been charged with an EPL crime. We do think the coverage will be kind of consistent. We're also seeing some insurers enter this space, though there will be clear COVID exclusions added to that coverage as well. And we anticipate retentions to go up, especially along the coastal states. Historically, California and New York tend to be more litigious and tend to be more favorable to the claimant. And so those have usually their own retentions, and those are going significantly higher. We also anticipate pricing to go up, and that's really driven by the settlements and the claim activity.
Great. Fiduciary, this is near and dear to all of you Treasury people, because this is about your actions or inaction. So you can see that, again, the insurance carriers are pulling back on their deployed capacity, basically shrinking the layers that they're willing to take a risk on. Coverage is also down. Sublimits or exclusions may come into play. They want higher retentions. And this is all driven by their claims experience, and they want higher pricing. Fidelity and crime. So this is basically employee dishonesty. It's the big one here. Capacity, again, is down. Coverage is basically staying the same. It's not going to change, but they want higher retentions and they want higher pricing. We didn't include a particular slide for workers' compensation, but I just want to say to all of you that that line is fascinating to me, because that essentially has no changes. That's not experiencing the hard market. But in California, anyway, we really expected the claims to go up because Gavin Newsom said, hey, if you have COVID, you can claim a work comp claim, because it's so hard to distinguish where you got it from. So we thought that that would explode. Well, it didn't at all. So we're curious. I mean, some of my assumptions are, well, more people working at home, they're not getting injured. They're not as stressed because they're not commuting to work. I mean, we don't know really why, but it's been a pleasant surprise.
It has. The one caveat to that I might add is just recently there was a settlement, I believe it was in Illinois, where an individual fell down his stairs and broke his hip and claimed a work comp claim and won because the judge found him to be commuting to his office downstairs.
Oh,
And so I have heard from a few underwriters that if we start to see an uptick in those claims, that might change the industry a little bit. But so far, that's a one-off case that we've heard of. It was just interesting that the judge really did side on him for commuting within his own home and that being a work comp claim. So we are going to send you guys the complete report. We only included snippets, like I've said a couple times. So this will go into more depth on every line of coverage, and then also has some industry specific information, whether you're in real estate or construction or energy or so forth. So we think it's a valuable report, and we're happy to send a copy over to you. And then if you're interested, we're happy to take one-off calls if you want to talk about any questions you have yourself, or you want feedback on your current program or whatever it may be. If it's a better way to connect one-on-one, we're happy to take any of those calls together or individually to connect with you.
right.
And lastly, we have any questions.
Were you okay? You're sharing this with this presentation. I was madly taking notes, but I'm sure I missed some stuff. So we'd love a copy of it if possible.
Of course, we'll share our deck as well as the full report that we got some information from.
Yeah, there's a much more extensive report that we have that we can share as well.
I may, if it's okay with you, use one of the slides and post it on LinkedIn, because I thought there was just a lot of interesting stuff, particularly as it pertains to the impact of climate change on insurance.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We would love that. That'd be great. Know this too, Susie. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll just quickly say, throughout my career, I've worked with a lot of captives, which we're seeing more and more of now, right? As some companies, they just don't want to deal with the fluctuations in the market, so they're forming group captives or wholly owned captives. But also the parametric coverages are really coming into play. As Susie said, she couldn't get coverage for named storms. Well, there's a whole nother part of the reinsurance market that's called the parametric market. For instance, you can go to them, and I do a lot of work with the University of California, all 10 campuses and the 5 hospitals. I've been their strategic consultant for 9 years. So they went to the parametric marketplace to get earthquake coverage, because they don't need it on all their buildings, because FEMA will probably jump in, but they need it for the loss of tuition that might happen. So they bought coverage just in between particular or over a certain limit. When the earthquake gets to 5.3, I don't remember the exact number, then we need coverage. So you can make very specific parameters for those catastrophe coverages. Just anyway, what I want to say to all of you is I'm happy to take any questions on any of that stuff. I'm at a point in my career where I just want to help people. So, fire away.
Okay, I have a question. My educational background is economics, and your topic was marvelously wide, interesting. It impacts the whole economics, not only in US, but also worldwide. My question would be, how do you anticipate the low income sector after all this, what we have in the past, at these 3 years? COVID is the topic, and then after the flooding, earthquake, etc. How do you anticipate all this? What kind of experience did you have in the past? Thank you.
What kind, in terms of the whole economy, you mean? Who will be hurt the most? Is that what you're asking, Joseph?
Yes, you are. How do you adjust your price policy with inflation, especially with the low income sector? And then, as you know, COVID caused that many jobs are lost. Possibly they will not back to market. How do you adjust? Do you have a certain policy that you follow? Let's say every year you increase 2.8%, etc. Since the income has not been adjusted to the inflation in the past 2 years.
Right. We don't. I don't. And I mean, I have my personal feelings. Like you, I was an economics major as well. I have my personal feelings about how, you know, the people at the bottom of the income always seem to take it hurts them more, seemingly. So, but that's, we're not using any formulas, and the insurance industry is not using any formulas to adjust pricing. They're only using their own loss experience to adjust their pricing.
For instance, if I compare as an example, DMV, Department of Motor Vehicle, they don't adjust the price with the inflation and low income sector. Even though in the past the license, exactly. If you look in the rest of the index of the prices, nothing has been adjusted. Suppose the license fee you paid 7, 8 years ago, $220, $300, not so much has been adjusted, maybe $10 less. Therefore, I would like to compare your policy with this kind of things adjusting to the low income sector.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So today we've only been talking about commercial, you know, business risk, not personal lines. But I don't believe that I'm not an expert in personal lines. Emily did work in personal lines for a short period. But I don't believe the insurance companies make any adjustments for that.
And yeah, not that I'm aware of.
So unfortunately, yeah, it's harder for them.
Okay, thank you. Certainly, it would be a couple of sessions to discuss this because your topic is very interesting and impacts many sectors. It's not just the insurance. So, in order to have a chance that others they anticipate on the discussion, I stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I found it incredibly insightful and interesting and a little bit concerning. There was a lot of those going up in the wrong direction and going down in the wrong direction. So I'm getting the general sense that my prices are going up and capacity and access is going down. Bit worrisome year coming up. Okay.
Yeah.
The thing is,
It doesn't seem like it, but you know, when they show a report like that, but it is cyclical.
yeah,
I'm sure
it is.
you'll
I was just gonna say.
confirm it. You know, capacity goes up, capacity goes down as new players enter the market, and you know, as good years happen, things ease out. So it's very cyclical.
Right, and the price goes up. I'm sure other entrants will come in and say, "Hey, that's pretty attractive market. We want to be in there." Like that.
Exactly. It's very cyclical, and I've lived through some of the worst cycles back in the early 80s when public entities could not buy liability risk. Higher education institutions couldn't get it, so they started forming, you know, their own groups, whether they be joint powers of authority or other kinds of group captives. So, but you know, we came out of that. So it will go full cycle.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for putting that together. It's super interesting and very helpful, especially as CFOs, we start looking at renewal insurance to have a little bit of insight of what the market looks like. And I think your contact information was on there. So if people want to ping you and bother you, I really appreciate the offer. And we will send the recording to anyone who registered, because I got some emails and texts from folks that said they had a hard time getting on, or as it happens, something popped up in the schedule and they couldn't make it. But I know I've gone back and looked at the recording and presentation offline later if I couldn't make the meeting. So
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Your email's on the website, right?
I don't know if our website has our full contact information, but we'll share the deck that has our information in there. And you can reach us on LinkedIn. I believe some of our emails have been shared at some point. We'll make sure everyone has our contact information.
Yeah, Charlotte usually does a great job of sending out the recording and the presentation. If it's okay with you, then she'll do that.
Yeah, of course.
After the call.
Happy to do that.